morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Hopefully we'll have politicians here aboard very soon. In the meantime, we have it waiting on the radio or on the telephone here, Mr. Rasheed Hooda. And Mr. Hooda, good morning. This is Bill here, and we have Judy just about to find her seat.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
Well, we're fine. You've had a little sabbatical, been down to Texas, and now you're back, as Willie Nelson says, on the road again.
On the road again.
Yeah.
Yes,
Now you are where I read your blog this morning, and what state are you now in, sir?
I am in Oklahoma, currently between El Reno and Weatherford, Oklahoma. Halfway between there.
And how's your hiking weather, sir?
So far, so good. It was kind of hot and sunny on Sunday and Monday, but yesterday I was fortunate. Most of the day was cloudy and cool. So that half out this morning, it looks like it's going to be another clear but cool day, not so hot.
Yeah.
Forecast is about 75 degrees.
Now, I saw your picture, and it looks to me like we have a leaner, meaner Rasheed Hooda.
Yes, sir. I've lost about 30-plus pounds since I started.
30?
And,
all right.
Leaner for sure. Meaner is not part of my makeup.
I kind of read that into your daily blogs. That meaner just doesn't quite fit with you. Tell us, maybe the folks might be interested in knowing this this device that you wear to monitor your steps and so forth, the cardio and all that, called Fitbit. Tell us a little bit about Fitbit. It could be purchased about anywhere now today.
Yes. I received my Fitbit as a gift from my walking club back in Houston before I was leaving. I had joined a group of people who were walking to promote health. Mm-hmm. And there was a group of about 20 of us who would get together and walk every morning after prayers. And when they found out that I was planning on walking from Chicago to L.A., they got together and set me off with a wonderful, generous monetary gift as well as a Fitbit. And they joked that they want to make sure that I am walking and not taking their money and taking off. So the Fitbit is it's an amazing thing. I wear on my wrist, and it counts the steps and figures out the mileage because you put in your pace. It also uses GPS to figure out the distance and calculates your pace based on that. So I did about 36,000 steps yesterday, a little over 36,000, which amounted to 17.6 miles.
And are you keeping with your pace pretty well to get 15 or so miles a day? You started at 12, now it's increased to, looks to me like you're doing a lot closer to 15 than you are 12.
16.
Yes. Yes.
I have about 1,500 miles left to go, and roughly about 100 days. So if I keep up that 15-mile pace, I should be able to finish it before my daughter's birthday and not have to worry about taking another sabbatical and come back.
Well,
so I can finish my walk and go home and spend my daughter's birthday with her.
And your daughter's birthday is what, January, sir?
January 29th. So
all right, sir.
Almost the entire month of January.
Well, it's good to visit with you. We have coming aboard now very quickly our Congressman, Darin, LaHood, and he's going to tell us how bad things are out in Washington, and I'll report to you, sir.
Well, it was good talking with you again, and
always
look forward to continuing this tradition.
As I always admonish you, stay safe out there, partner.
That's the plan, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, Rasheed. Okay.
Oh, thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Now, while we're waiting here, Judith K., why don't you give us a little kudo? You had a kudo that you wanted to talk about?
I'd like that, yeah.
Yes, please.
I went last Sunday afternoon to house blessing. The 20th Habitat House has been completed. The family will be moving in, and it's great. It's just a wonderful place. And also, the 21st home has begun. Now, you know those Habitat people. There's no paid person whatever.
That's the amazing.
It's all volunteer labor. It's all volunteer board, etc., and officers. The whole thing. It'd be nice if he came in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
I mean, I don't mean to be bossy, but be that as it may.
You own 50% of the show. You boss 50%.
Okay.
Well,
at any rate, it was a great thing.
We don't want to digress from that Habitat.
Because you know why? It's a hand up, not a hand out. These people have to pay for this house, and they have to do labor for this house before their own home and after their own home. Right. So it's not a present to them.
Well, it's a wonderful thing to have happen, and again, it speaks to the generosity of our community, which reminds me, of course, of the Harvest of Talents. My good, what was the figure? Over $1 million total. It's just incredible. There's a lot of caring, giving people in here. There just really are.
And right here in our town.
In the very, it's Lincoln, Logan County. Yeah. That's
right.
Well, Mr. LaHood is outside here, and we'll have to just proceed. Yeah, you do the commercial.
That'd be good.
Now. Right, get them out of the way. Yes, sir. For you. Oh, right here, everybody back live. My goodness gracious, it's almost 8:30 here. Our guest this morning, as a matter of fact, I'm going to defer to the 50% owner of the show, Judith K. Busby. I'd like to introduce our guest this morning, my dear.
Oh,
because you're kind of special, and he's pretty special, so that works both ways.
He's a good-looking fellow.
Yeah, I know. His dad's pretty proud of him.
Got a lot of tall going to him.
Well, that's
a bunch of tall.
That came with genes, I think it's called.
Yeah. Darin LaHood, our representative in Congress from this 18th Congressional District. Been out there a term now, and I'm sure you're having a wee of a time. And with him is his friend Brad, who did not disclose his last name for reasons known only to God. Nice to see you, Brad. Darin, thank you so much for coming. And you've been spending quite a bit of time in our little territory here.
Well, thank you for having me today, you guys. It's great to be back. Appreciate it very much. We are spending the day in Logan County again today. We were actually in Atlanta last week, and today we're going to speak at the high school here in Lincoln, and then we're going to speak at the Rotary Club. We're doing a tour at the hospital, going to visit with a few other folks. So we're happy to be here. And I think it's been about a year since I visited with you last, and I got sworn in on a special election last September of 2015, so I've just been in office for a little over a year. November will be my 4th election in 16 months because I had to win 2 special elections, was on the ballot last March, and then running again in November. But
you look pretty sane and healthy for a fellow who's been through that.
Well, thank you for saying that.
And you can still smile. Amazing.
Well, wait till I get done with him.
What a man.
I'm trying, but I will say, in all honesty, it's a honor and a privilege to represent Logan County and the 18th District in Washington, D.C. I'm truly honored to be there. And when I ran for this job, one thing that I talked about is, if I was fortunate enough to get elected, is staying grounded to the district, not forgetting who you work for. And so we've been back every single weekend since we got elected. And I like to travel around my district when I'm home. My wife and I, we have 3 young sons. We live in Dunlap, right outside of Peoria. Yeah. And our kids stayed here, and we're raising them here. And but it's great to be back here with you guys, and love being in Logan County.
Well, one of the things you talked about was moving toward toward congressional reform. Now, I know some of your cohorts out there in the Republican Party have birthed the Never Trump thing. You know what the alternative is, don't you? There's only two running, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what gave rise
fair and balanced
to
here, by the
this
way.
man that so many of the Republicans don't want is the fact that Congress was in a mill of a hess. And people didn't have a whole lot of faith in what's going on out there on the East Coast.
They don't.
What do you think?
Well, listen, one or two people are going to be president of the United States,
And that's the problem.
Well, it is a problem. We don't have a do-over in this race. And for me, what I've said is the two most important issues for me are fixing the economy, getting the economy back on track, not at 1% growth, but how do we get to 3 or 3.5% growth? And the second thing is the future of the Supreme Court. Whoever gets elected president is going to appoint 1 to 3 justices. And the issues that I feel strongly about that will be decided by the Supreme Court, protecting life, the Second Amendment, Constitution, religious freedom. I do not trust Hillary Clinton on fixing the economy or the future of the Supreme Court, and I can't support her.
I think, Darin, that the Supreme Court issue perhaps is the most important issue that of all of them that are on the table. Because you're talking about the future of this country. We got enough problems now, but if we go south in that department, in the judicial department, those of us who come behind us are in a pot of trouble.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly right, Bill. We have to put somebody in there. And think about this. Under the Obama administration, he put 2 justices on there, very liberal justices, Kagan and Sotomayor. People want common sense. They want the country to swing back. And frankly, we're not going to get that under a Hillary Clinton administration.
Why is common sense not in vogue at all?
I don't know. It's a good question. We need to bring more people to Logan County. That's what we need.
Okay.
Darin, in one of your newsletters, in an early news, you addressed, you said something about as a freshman in Congress at the time you wrote this, I've experienced a dysfunction in Washington firsthand. Well, if I ever saw a statement that was true, you could put that in the Bible, because there's so much dysfunction out there, and all parties. I don't care across the board. They're just dysfunction, and part of the problem is that it becomes an inbred process. And you've talked about term limits when you, and if I recall correctly, that you are in favor of term limits. And how in the world are we going to get? How do we go about that? It's not going to happen in my lifetime. I only got 2 or 3 more years. Who knows? But maybe not that. But seriously, that is these guys get out there, and ladies, some of whom are real gems, and they get so imbued with their own sense of power, and they don't want to give this thing up. And it's a begetting process.
Yeah. Well, I continue to be a strong supporter of term limits. I'm the sponsor of 2 different bills in Congress on term limits for legislators. When I was in the Illinois State Senate, I was the chief co-sponsor of term limits for the Illinois legislature. This was not meant to be a full-time job. This was not meant to be a lifetime job. Our democracy thrives on having new people, new ideas in our system, people that come in, and it shouldn't be a lifetime job, either in the state legislature or here. I continue to push for that. I have some other like-minded colleagues that like that, but we got to continue to have that. I'm also a big supporter of how we redraw our districts, getting rid of the gerrymandering, having the fair map process. That's a big issue. Fair map, term limits, and then I just introduced a bill in September, actually, with a Democrat called the Congress of Tomorrow. You mentioned dysfunction. The last time we passed a budget on time in Congress, all 12 appropriations bill, was 1996. When Bill Clinton was president, Newt Gingrich was speaker. The Congress is dysfunctional, so we introduced legislation to say we need to reform ourselves to make Congress more effective, efficient, and accountable. So under our legislation, we set up a bipartisan committee that would deal with all the reforms that we need. It would be a special committee, 12 Republicans, 12 Democrats, bicameral, bipartisan, to say, let's figure out how we reform Congress. So some people think we ought to go to a biannual budget. Maybe that's a good idea. Some people think we ought to get rid of the filibuster. Some people think that we ought to have term limits. Some people think we ought to spend more time in D.C. on weekends so we get to know members on both sides, and that will help. We have to fix ourselves. So our committee, it's a mechanism, it's a platform to have all these reform ideas come before the Congress to do it. We have to change the way we do things. You have to reform government. So our legislation, we got 40 co-sponsors. When we get back into session in November, we hope to get it passed, get it set up to fix ourselves.
Now that's commonsensical, but how in the world do you bring this to fruition when it's their game and their rules?
Well, you got to start somewhere. And that's what we're doing with this.
True is true.
We got to, and we're not starting with the leadership at the top. This is a grassroots effort. If you look at our 40 co-sponsors, it's all grassroots members of Congress from both sides of the aisle, Republicans, Democrats, liberal, conservative, but they all think the same thing. We have to fix the dysfunction. So what we've said is we're going to take it upon ourselves to do this. Now, I will also tell you, this is not unprecedented. So we've done this about every 30 years. The last time we did it was 1992, did it in 1966, and did it in 1945, where you form a special committee to, again, reform Congress. We call it the Congress of Tomorrow. We are in dire need of doing something like that. And so we're going to try to get this off the ground. When people say, what are you doing to fix Congress? We're doing this. Supporting term limits and changing how we redraw the districts.
One of the hot button things that needs reformed is the whole Veterans Administration. And the latest little debacle that they faced is this business of the average payback owed by these vets who re-upped is $15,000. Now, I don't know about the rest of the world, but to me, that's a heck of a chunk of change. Now,
well,
what in the world kind of thinking is that?
Well, if you remember, it's been about over a year now, but, we had a big scandal at the VA in Washington, D.C. before I got to Congress, and Obama said, President Obama said, I'm going to reform it, I'm going to fix everything. Well, 1 year later, we've fired one person in the VA.
Has.
That's what I understand.
One person. Our vets are the ones that have protected our freedom, that have made this country the great country it is. I set up a Veterans Advisory Committee that I have in my district, and on there I have about 35 veterans from World War II to World War I to Korea to Vietnam to Iraq and Afghanistan. And what I do with my Veterans Advisory Committee, we meet on a quarterly basis to work on the issues, whether that's health care, whether that's job placement, whether that's PTSD, working on issues to help our veterans. But to your point, we need to reform the Veterans Administration. I've been the sponsor of 2 different bills that will do that. We got to protect our veterans. We got to take care of them. They're the ones that have helped us protect this country.
Amen.
Well, out there in the swamp, as they call it, among many other things, that's a nicer appellation. Here in Illinois, if Darin LaHood presents a bill and it goes to Mike Madigan's committee and it never comes out because he doesn't like Darin LaHood, how does it work out there?
Well, the good thing is, in the House of Representatives, Republicans control the chamber. So, I think we run, I know we run things much differently than Mike Madigan. I'm not sure there's any other place in the country. Remember, Mike Madigan's the longest serving Speaker of the House in the country. He's been there for 45 years.
If there was ever need for term limits, that alone would do it.
He is a poster child for term limits.
Oh, yeah. And a minor deity.
and if you haven't seen the movie on Mike Madigan, you ought to see it. There's a 1 hour movie out on him. I don't know if the Illinois Policy Institute.
I don't think I could sit there for 16
minutes. Well, you ought to watch. But Paul Ryan, who's our Speaker of the House from Wisconsin.
And they loved him up there. What's the matter with him?
Who's that, Mike Madigan? Or
No, I'm talking about Paul Ryan. My golly, Milwaukee thought he walked on water.
Yeah.
And what's the matter? He drank bad water out there in the swamp or something?
Well, he's got a tough job. He's in the House. We have the largest majority we've had in 90 years, right? We're 247 Republicans, but you got a lot of different views in the Republican Congress. But frankly, I think Paul, he's very much a policy guy, but he's got common sense Midwestern values. He comes back back every weekend, got a young family, but we got to start getting some stuff done. People are frustrated when, remember a couple years ago we said, give us a Republican House, give us a Republican Senate, we'll change everything. Lots of promises. Not a lot of them came to fruition.
Not so much.
We have to lead, and we're not doing enough leading. Now, frankly, I'm glad John Boehner left and is gone. I think Paul Ryan is a refreshing change, but you got to lead. You get a short honeymoon period. He's just been there less than a year as Speaker, but you got to lead. You got to get some stuff done. Fiscal responsibility, smaller government, ethics and transparency. You got to show, and a pro-growth economy. So many of the things in our country would be solved with a pro-growth economy. More jobs, more opportunities. Not at 1% growth, but how do we get to 2 or 3% growth? That will help with our debt, help with our education system, transportation system, so many things. But we haven't focused on that. Frankly, I wish we would do that more as Republicans. Not always be the party of opposition, the party of proposition.
Well, you know, it seems to me, I could be in error on it. Well, I've been in error a lot of times. But it seems a gentleman or a lady gets elected to a state legislature or to Congress, and I'm at the legislature, I got to bring up a new law. So you have some of the damnedest, funniest, and dumb laws ever propounded, and that just takes up somebody's important time. And I don't know, that's just, I guess that's human nature, and you're never going to solve that. But just because a guy or a lady is a legislator, they think, well, we got to introduce a new law. Well, that's not the case at all.
Yeah, we got a lot of laws on the books, but we ought to focus on the real priorities, right? The economy is first and foremost. Also, our ag community, you know, we of the 435 congressional districts, mine is the 9th largest in terms of corn and soybean production. You know, our ag economy with prices is hurting a little bit now, and we got to support our ag community along with the broader economic outlook for the country. But ag is important, whether that's crop insurance, whether that's ethanol, whether that's more trade opportunities for our farmers. Transportation is very, very important for our farmers, and regulation, fighting WOTUS, the waters of the U.S., and a number of other things. Ag is very, very important. I remind my friends from Chicago, ag's the #1 industry in the state of Illinois. It's not anything, it's agriculture.
That's right.
Yeah. Now,
that's right. I was going to say, out of the 5 of us in this room, 3 of us have to pay for our health care, and the Affordable Care is not. And it's screwing up the rest of the world as well. Now, he says his is going up 44%. I haven't gotten the bad letter yet. You know, this is an issue to people like the 3 of us who are regular working people trying to keep it all together.
I'm not kidding. Well, it's the Unaffordable Care Act is what it is.
That's
yes,
exactly
sir.
correct.
Every promise that was made with Obamacare has not come to fruition, right? Your premiums are going to go down. You're going to have more health care choices. It's going to be more cost effective. None of these things, you're going to be able to keep your doctor. None of these promises that were made have come to, and it's what makes people cynical and skeptical of government when you have President of the United States and all these folks saying, hey, we're going to pass this and it's going to be great for you, right?
No, we had to pass it so we could find out what was in it, you may recall.
That's a whole nother issue. So, but the point is, I guess the bottom line is that government doesn't run big things well. And that's a good example of it. You can't let government. So I was proud, earlier this year to support a bill that would replace Obamacare, repeal and replace it. We have to get back to more market-based ideas, more competition in the system. We don't have that now. This is going to collapse under its own weight. It's like a Ponzi scheme. That's where it's headed.
Now, let me ask you this. Here we are in the last few days here, and we've hit the bricks with this information on this monumental increases in insurance. Is that going to be? I saw a headline this morning in that vaunted newspaper called the Courier. Will this be a deal maker for Trump?
Well, we'll have to see on that. I mean, we all know this in this room, Bill. Elections have consequences, right? Mm-hmm. And we're seeing it. We've seen it over the last 7.5 years. Elections have consequences, and if you want change in this country, you got to look at who's going to bring you that change. And premiums keep going up. You look at our stagnant growth, an economy that's very, very stressed. People don't know if they're if we're going into a recession, are we coming out of a recession? But the high premiums, people ought to take notice of that, and the fact that this was promises that have not been fulfilled. And if you talk to job creators, people in business, they don't want to hire more people because they don't want to pay for the health care and what it's going to do.
By the way, I should, in the interest of fairness, fair and balanced, really unbalanced up here, I would say. But for the eight Democrats in the county who might want to have a question for Congressman LaHood, 648-5510. He'll be happy. He's an equal opportunity talker. He'll talk to Democrats or Bessarabians. It doesn't make any difference at all.
Yep, happy to do that. Yep.
No, seriously. You don't make too much light of this because we're in a serious, serious problem. What do you talk about out there in the Beltway about the FBI? Suddenly they're very suspect.
And they were the
and I
heroes.
think rightfully so. It's not sacrosanct anymore, or so it appears.
Yeah. I spent 10 years as a state and federal prosecutor before I ever got into elected office. And part of that time I was a federal prosecutor in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I worked with some wonderful FBI agents. And I will tell you, the grassroots of the FBI agents out there are good people. They continue to be good people. They're some of our, best citizens that we have in terms of their commitment and dedication to this country. I was very disappointed when Director Comey had his press conference this last summer. And if you listen to that press conference and you listen to the words he used to describe Hillary Clinton, right? Extreme carelessness, gross negligence, violated federal law, misled. All that leads you to believe that, this should have been brought to a grand jury. And there should have been, they should have been able to make the decision on whether to indict it. But that didn't happen here. In our system of government, the FBI does the investigation, but you turn that investigation over to the prosecutor. That's the Attorney General. That didn't happen here. Comey was the investigator, but also the judge and jury, right? Made the decision on there. That's not the way our system works, and that's my frustration with it. Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, who, by the way, was on a plane with Bill Clinton 3 weeks before, having a casual conversation. Now, you can't tell me
about the grandkids. I'm sorry. Don't forget.
Very casual. Yeah.
So, to your point, Bill, a lot of people lost confidence in Jim Comey because it's two sets of rules, right? It's a set of rules for elected privileged people, which Hillary Clinton falls in there, and the rest of the people out there. And that fundamental unfairness, that unreasonableness is what drives people crazy. And then you couple that with the fact that Loretta Lynch is supposed to be independent, and it leads to cynicism and skepticism. But I will tell you this, the vast majority of FBI agents that are out there protecting America are good people. But I was very disappointed in Director Comey.
No question.
But the grassroots people, generally speaking, are always dedicated people who went into it for the proper reasons. That's not where the system falls down. I believe in the global warming. I accept that. Okay, it's good. I'm good with that. But I'm not quite as worried about that as I am about ISIS, which seems to be down the ladder. They don't care where they are. Logan County is just as good to them as down in Florida.
Yeah.
So why aren't we making more progress?
Well, I think we've been leading from behind on the issue with ISIS. And if you remember President Obama's campaign when he ran in 2008 was, I'm pulling everybody out of Iraq. We're going to pull our troops out. If you look at every military victory the United States has had in the last 100 years, we've kept bases in place where we've been victorious. That's why we have bases in Germany, right? Bases in Japan, bases in Korea. You secure the peace,
Philippines.
you keep Philippines. You secure the peace by keeping bases there. So after we did the Iraq invasion, we had bases there in Iraq. Frankly, when Obama pulled those out in 2008, 2009, what happened? The Iraqi army vaporized. and it formed ISIS. ISIS was formed there, and they're not the JV team. I got news for, and so what did we do? I mean, that created the chaos and the civil war in Syria, and I think that was a mistake. I think the Obama administration realizes that now. So now we're making up for that. Today we're fighting in Mosul, and I think we'll be victorious, but we got 5,000 troops back there, special forces on the ground. My point being, I think a mistake was made by doing that. Now, to ISIS. This is an entity that there is no negotiating with. You know, we tried to negotiate with the Taliban a little bit. ISIS wants to eliminate our culture. They want to eliminate Western society. They are the antithesis of everything we believe in. They don't believe women should be educated, that women should drive. If you believe in Jesus Christ, you're going to be beheaded. Either they win or we win, is my philosophy on that. And you have to use force, and you have to, use military power to wipe them out. Now, the problem, Judith, is what do you do? We could go in tomorrow and wipe out Raqqa, their capital in Syria. But what do you do the next day? Who's going to go there to fill in the void? We want to make sure we don't create another Syria. And you can look all over the Middle East, and there's lots of dysfunction and chaos in Libya, in Yemen, in Somalia, in Syria right now. What do we do the next day? Who's going to come in and fill that void? And there's a big foundational battle going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia, Shia and Sunni. So it's complicated. It's nuanced. We have to make sure that we bring in moderate Arab countries to help. Turkey can help with that. But we can't be the world's policeman over there. But ISIS has to be stopped and eliminated, because look at the lone wolf attacks that have been directly related to ISIS. The radicalization, Orlando, San Bernardino, what happened in Nice, France, in Paris, France, in Belgium. It's not a matter of if, it's when it happens again here. You have to go after ISIS with force and eliminate them.
Go ahead, Judith. I want to defer to you because you have a litany of questions. Listen, she's the bright girl in this outfit.
Not so much. Now, I hate to leave that, and if you have something more to say, by George, I'm here to listen on that.
Well, I
think it scares me.
It's very important.
Well, it is, and listen, I think the administration finally gets it now, but we wasted so much time on this, Judith. It's very, very frustrating to see this, but it is something that needs to be addressed. We want to contain them there so they don't come over to this country. I supported a bill last November that would raise the level of scrutiny on refugees that want to come from Syria to this country. And we have to have a higher level of scrutiny, not because they're Muslim, but because they come from terrorist countries.
Yes.
So what I've said is countries like Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, some parts of Egypt, we have to have a higher level of refugees that want to come from there.
My heart bleeds for those refugees. Holy Friday, they've got kids and grandkids, and they're in such despair. It's an awful thing. But you say a higher level of vetting. I don't think we have any at all, have we?
Well, we have just regular vetting like we do for all refugees.
Like somebody comes from Norway, or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that isn't really going to do it.
Well, exactly. That's why this is a whole different entity. And then you couple that with the fact of the lone wolf attacks, the radicalization that's going on.
Yes.
There's a concerted effort by ISIS in Syria to, again, send out these lone wolves to have people attack America, and that's really what we have to stop. So that higher level of scrutiny, what our bill asked for was, we want the FBI to certify in writing that they've checked these people out and that they're okay to come to America. That's the kind of level we need.
Definitely.
648-5510. Somebody might have a question of Congressman LaHood. And as I tell you, he's a pretty big dude, so he can take a little criticism too. He'll do that very graciously. You go right ahead. 648-5510. I would like to ask you, sir, about what your opinion is. Out of all this dysfunction in the Republican Party at this particular time, do you foresee the possibility of a third party as a fallout of down the road?
Well, I think it's very, very difficult. We talk about this every 4 years with a third party. Remember, our Republican Party, we had 17 candidates that started off in this process, right? And all different kinds of Republicans, right? You had libertarians, kind of a Rand Paul. You had real conservative ones. You had kind of populist ones. You had moderate ones. I mean, we had all different types and variations of Republicans. So, you know, when people say, you know, I want a third party, I mean, I think if you look at the 17 we had, you can find one that you might like, right? But we live in a democracy. And so I think we had a lot of choices. I mean, there was quite a few choices on the Democrat side too. You had, if you wanted to go more liberal, you could go Bernie Sanders. I don't know why you would. If you want, I mean, I think, you know, he brought Hillary Clinton even more liberal, but and then you had a couple other choices on that side. My point being, Bill, is I think we have plenty of choices in both parties. However, but the longer we go with dysfunction and not getting things done, people are going to be looking for other alternatives and other options for how we solve our system. But we have very intractable problems, right? Think about it. You know, we're $19 trillion in debt. We've doubled the national debt in 10 years. I have an opinion on how you get that done. Most Republicans do. You have fiscal responsibility. You need to, you know, cut back on spending. You have to have a more pro-growth economy. But you can't get people to agree on that. Some of these things, you know, it used to be we didn't have this kind of gridlock. You got to come together and solve these issues on the debt and on the economy. Those are the two most important things.
What that debt is going to do to my 7 great-grandkids is disgusting. Now, that's under the two-party system. So how's that working for you?
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the difference if we have 3, I figure? Also, the case has been made for the fact that we shouldn't have a businessman leading this country. It's got to be done by a politician because they know the ropes. How's that working for you?
Well, that's a great point, Judith. I mean, again, you know, the media, not you guys here, but the media has not been our friend in this.
We don't call ourselves media. We're just neighbors.
Well, I wish we had more neighbors in the real media, I'll tell you that.
Let me ask you this, sir. A gentleman by the name of Ray LaHood, if memory serves me, made a genuine effort to have more collegiality in the Great Hall of Congress, and that lasted for about as long as a spit dries on a hot brick. Sorry about that, folks. Tell me about that. How are we going to get together so that Darin LaHood can shake the hand and mean it of the guy across the aisle?
Yeah, one thing I've tried to do in the year that I've been there, every week that I'm in D.C., I try to meet 2 or 3 other members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, to get to know them on a personal level. And I've tried to do that just because we may disagree on policy, but if you get to know somebody on a personal level, it's easier when something comes along where you got to work with them on that. So I think the other thing is, I mentioned before, the Congress of Tomorrow, a way to, again, regulate ourselves, reform Congress. I'm working with Dan Lipinski, who's a Democrat, a district much different than mine. He comes from the Chicago area, but he's a good man. So you got to find areas where you can work in a bipartisan way to do that. But I think meeting people, engaging people, getting to know them is the first step in that. Too many times you just immediately think, oh, they're a Democrat or they're a liberal, I could never work with them. That's not the philosophy I take. Listen, I'm a conservative Republican. I'm proud of my record, but where I can find common ground, where we can work together on some of these big issues, of course you got to look at that.
But that's the secret to everything, meeting someone. You can't say, I don't like Presbyterians. Meet one. They may be nice people. Maybe you are one of the people who says, I don't like black people. Okay, meet one. They're nice people. If you just meet people and have an open mind, we'd have a better world. And that's the truth. And speaking of the world, one of the things that our end of the world thinks about are things like Medicare and Social Security. You know, we are recipients of. And therefore, we wonder about the reports that come out right along about, well, it's going to be broke, maybe in 2017. What are we going to do about that? They call that an entitlement. I question that heading because we paid into that for I paid into it till I was 70. Well, I'm still paying into it. By George, and I'm 77 now. So there you go. But I worked regular till I was 75. So you see, I did pay a long time from 16 to 75.
Well, my ox got gored more than yours. I worked till after I was 80.
Yeah, see? So how do you figure we're entitled? Having an entitlement, please.
Well, folks that have played by the rules, did everything we asked them to do, I mean, we have an obligation to support them. So, when we think about, clearly the path that Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are on is unsustainable for the future. But folks that are retired or close to retirement that have done everything they're supposed to, we can't. There's a fundamental unfairness with doing anything against it. But younger, I'm 48 years old. What I've said is, personally, I would agree with raising the retirement age. For younger people, look at means testing for younger folks. I think you have to do that. You have to look at how you reform government, make it more efficient, effective, and accountable, but you got to look at different options, and it has to be done in a bipartisan way. This is not just one party doing that, but to save Social Security down the road, we're going to have to make some changes for the younger generation.
But money management doesn't seem to be in vogue either in Washington and certainly not in Illinois.
I agree with that.
Now, Congressman, there's an elephant pounding on the door, and I'm going to let him in. I'm going to let him in. How is it that we pass laws out there in the Beltway that the folks who pass them are exempt from them?
Well, we should never pass any laws that exempt Congress from any of that. We got to remember, again, who we work for, who our bosses are, and make sure that everybody is equal, is treated fairly and equally in this country.
But some are more equal than others.
Well, that's true. But we in the year that I've been there, Bill, I read every single piece of legislation that I vote on. In my first year I was there, I never missed a vote on anything that I voted on, and I read everything that I do. But I'm not aware of anything we passed that exempt members of Congress. We treated everybody the same in this society, and that's the way it should be moving forward.
When you see on television one of the hearings in Congress, there's the guy making his impassioned speech to the body at hand, which isn't at hand. Is that the truth? Is that how it works?
That's the way it is.
That is the way it is on some things. All of these members, 435, are in committee hearings, busy meeting with constituents, doing stuff throughout the chamber. So, there's many instances where, you're speaking to an empty chamber. Yeah.
Sure. Well, a lot of times, and I can understand this, a lot of guys want to get up and say something good about something that happened in their community and all that. That's understandable. That's procedure, and it's a kind of a pro rata thing. Yeah. We've run out of time, Congressman. We appreciate very much. Brad, thank you for bringing this young man here with us this morning.
Yeah, Brad, you're a nice man, kind of a strong silent type, huh?
We appreciate your being here with us, Brad. Congressman Darin LaHood, we really appreciate you spending your time giving us your frank and honest opinions. We always try to close Viewpoint with some quote that's analogous to the program of the day. Only Will Rogers could come up with things like this. God love him. There's only one redeeming feature about this whole election. It'll be over soon. And let everybody pray it's not a tie, for we couldn't go through this thing again. Thank you, Reverend Darin LaHood.
Well said. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Judith. Always a pleasure to be with you. I'm honored and proud to serve this district in Congress, and look forward to coming back to visit with you again.
Look forward to seeing you the rest of the day.
We'd like that.
Right, thank you.